darkness and loss and diminishment in our lives, at least what we think is diminishment and loss, you are there as well. You comfort and you explain things to us that this world just does not understand. And my prayer is that you would bless our church and these next couple of days, especially tomorrow. Lord, I pray that you would just reveal yourself in a tremendous way through Brother Tom's service of celebration and honoring his life. And I ask you to bless Saturday. May these men leave encouraged and just strengthened in their ministry. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, we are in Isaiah chapter number 15. And I need, Jeremy, would you do me a favor? Would you hand out a map for me? Isaiah 15 and 16 is where we are. Just hold on to your map for just a minute. As nations touch Israel, bless you. As nations touch Israel, God touches them. This is the child that God brought into the world. And he blesses those that bless the Jews. He curses those who curse the Jews. What would you do if somebody slapped your child? Okay? It wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good. So, what do you think happens when the world slaps God's child? So, what we're looking at in the next number of chapters is God's put to writing. You're going to be very specific. And this was true thousands of years ago, that who touches the Jew touches the apple of God's eye, the scripture says. And the word apple means pupil. Now, if you're holding a baby, that baby starts going nuts with his hands. What do you protect? Your eyes. You cover your eyes because you don't want anything jabbing you in your eyes. And so what the world has done, any time, in any point in history, when they have abused Israel, they have poked their finger in God's eye. And God does not forget that. And so in the Old Testament, in this ancient world, international relations were strained. They didn't have ambassadors that went from one nation to another to try to work things out. They didn't do that. Kind of like today, international relations are strained. We don't get along with every nation in the world, and every nation in the world doesn't get along with us. And in the Old Testament, this strain is seen by a number of collections of prophecies against foreign nations. Isaiah is the Mount Everest. He was the greatest prophet in the Bible. And these foreign nations somehow wronged the Jews. Now, it could have been in a military attack. It could have been in a, you're not coming through our land to get to your land. You're not coming through here. It could have been that. It could have been talking about, hey, there's a Jew there behind that tree that's trying to escape. Go get him. It could have been any number of things, and those things are going to be enumerated in our text. But God brought reciprocal judgment against every nation that slapped his kid. He did that in the Old Testament, and he does that still today. Egypt, to give you an example of what we're talking about, Egypt had an equivalent to these biblical prophecies in what's called execration text. And an execration text was what they thought was a magical curse. They would get a bowl made out of clay or a little clay figurine, and they would write on that little figurine while that clay was wet. They'd write the names of the nation or the nations involved in the curse, and then they would smash that figurine or that bowl, breaking the power of those foreign nations on Egypt. There is even one that we have found, one of these execration texts that says this, quote, "The ruler of Jerusalem and his retainers," end quote. So, they made one of these execration texts against Israel. And Isaiah lived during the time when Assyria was the muscle on the international block in that part of the world. And within 25 years of his ministry beginning, the Assyrians had captured Samaria. They had put an end to the northern kingdom, which was Samaria, in 722 BC. They came against Samaria. They crushed Samaria. They hauled off its population. They left some, and they brought in other foreign refugees from other nations that they had defeated, dumped them in this mix, and they became this mongrel nation that in the New Testament was referred to as the Samaritans. And the Jews absolutely abhorred these people because of their mixed blood. And 21 years after 722 BC, these same pagan forces of Assyria came against the gates of Jerusalem. And the purpose was, of course, to destroy Jerusalem as well. And they would have captured it had it not been for the hand of God moving in. And in one night, God personally killed 185,000 military personnel of Assyria in one night. And so that was kind of a wake-up call to the Assyrians, and so they got on their donkeys and boogity-boogity-boogity went back to the house. And so the Lord protected Jerusalem from that. And the greatest problems, however, that Judah faced were not military. The greatest problems that Judah faced were racial and religious. These people had become so arrogant that they were Jews. They had become so pagan because they had turned to the idols of all of these other nations. And there needed to be a man, a single man that would stand up and say, "This is sin. This is wrong." And he stood in the halls of government in Jerusalem, and he pointed his finger at the king, he pointed his finger at the priest, he pointed his finger at all the suits and the movers and shakers, and says, "You people are killing us, and you need to stop it." That guy was Isaiah. He did this for 50 tireless years. Preached for 50 years. And one scholar said, I love what one scholar said about Isaiah. Here's a quote. Quote, "Never, perhaps, has there been another prophet like Isaiah who stood with his head in the clouds and his feet on solid earth, with his heart in the things of eternity and his mouth and head in the things of time, with his spirit in the eternal counsel of God and his body in a very definite moment in history," end point. That's pretty powerful. So we're in a section of Isaiah that is an invoice to several foreign nations. And the Lord is going to pick the nations that have touched his kid. They slapped Israel in one way or another. And each nation is listed. Chapters 15 and 16 deal with Moab. On your map, Israel is, let's take a look here real quick. Everybody get a map, by the way? All right. Find the Dead Sea right in the middle of the page. Go to the right. Down about the middle of the Dead Sea, down to the bottom of the Dead Sea, is the Arnon River and the Zered River. You see those? That area right there was Moab. Just above it was Ammon. Below the Dead Sea, out in the Negeb area, was Edom. Now, the Moabites were the product of this incestuous relationship that Lot had with one of his daughters. you remember, the Moabites and the Ammonites. Lot and his family were rushed out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot's wife got killed. Their husbands, the daughters' husbands got killed, and so we've got a daddy and two daughters. And so these girls didn't want to die childless, and so they got their daddy drunk one night in a cave. They brought the wine with them, by the way, because wine doesn't grow in caves. And so they hauled the wine with them. They got daddy drunk. They had this little plot. You get him drunk tonight and go in, and I'll get him drunk tomorrow night, and da-da-da. And so we've got these two children that were daughters of, or their daddy was their granddaddy. That's a little convoluted, but that's the way this thing took out. And these two boys had families. And these families grew up to be some of the most hated enemies of the Jews that there's ever been. And because of that, of course, they slapped God's kid. And when they did that, the Lord wrote that down in his book of memory. And at some point in the future, as a matter of fact, it was 3 years after chapter 15 that this thing actually was taken to literal ends. Moab was destroyed by the Assyrians, and they didn't survive another 3 years here. Now, by the late 8th century, we're talking about in the 700s, Moab had been absorbed by this Assyrian bully, as a lot of these little nations had, these little tribal nations. And in 562, she was destroyed by Babylon and disappeared from history. There are no more Moabites today. Today, Moab is in southeastern Jordan. That's the property that they used to live in. And there is archaeological evidence that we have our hands on that Moab did exist. And there is a stele, S-T-E-L-E, and a stele is like the Moabite stone. It was a rock with hieroglyphics carved in it. Kings would do this, to brag about their military conquest and everything. And this Mesha stele has a line in it that says that the king of Moab defeated a son of King Omri of Israel. So this is in 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 9 through 12, as a matter of fact. And so, matter of fact, let's turn there. 2 Kings 18. Beginning with verse 9. It came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, that's king of Judah, southern kingdom, which was in the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that's the northern kingdom, that Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, they took it. Even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. Now, we've got this conquest, and the king of Assyria wasn't through with his mopping up operation here. He came to Moab, and what we've got now in chapter 15 specifically is kind of like a news report. Assyria is going to start in the north of the country, and these cities, many of them, we have no clue where they are today. Now, some we have a general idea, but he's going to start at the north. And these cities in the north are going to be the first ones hit. And when the military comes into these cities, it's going to shove thousands of refugees to the south. Makes sense, right? These people are they're running for their lives. They're packing their suitcases. They're getting everything they can haul, and that's what they're doing, all right? And they're headed to Sela, which is Petra, with this rock city down south. All right, now, beginning of verse number 1. The burden of Moab, because in the night, and the word because means surely, translated surely, in the night, Ar of Moab, that was a northern city, is laid waste and brought to silence. Because in the night, and it turned out to be it was in the same night, Ker of Moab is laid waste and brought to silence. So what does that mean, brought to silence? Nobody survived. So they've got these cities in the north that this movement came down. The Assyrian military has killed everybody in town. Now, verse 2, he, that is Moab, is gone up to Bajith and to Dibon. We don't exactly know where these cities are. We know they're in the north. We do know this, that this was kind of like a worship center. We do know that. Go look at the next phrase. The high places to weep. So where did they go? They got kicked out. They went to church. All right? So, of course, this is the temple of a false god, which we know who that was. We know it was Chemosh. Chemosh was the national idol of the Moabites. And so they go up to their temple of Chemosh, and they howl over Nebo, or in Nebo, and over Medeba. On all their heads shall be baldness, and every beard cut off. In the part of the world where we're talking about, if you wanted to show absolute brokenness and mourning, you cut your hair off, and you shaved your beard. You just, yeah, really, yeah. But these people ran up to the temple. They are screaming. They are howling. They are crying. They are praying to Chemosh, save us, protect us. Now, verse 3, in their streets they shall gird themselves with sackcloth. On the tops of their houses and in their streets everyone shall howl, weeping abundantly. And that phrase means to melt in tears. These people, they were being slaughtered wholesale. Oh my word, the Assyrians were brutal. When it came to warfare, they didn't kill you with dignity. They just slaughtered you. They came in on horses. They ran through the fields, and we'll get to it in just a minute. They ran through their fields, and it apparently was about harvest time. They ran these horses through their fields. They stomped all their harvest into the dirt. There was nothing left. These Assyrians just killed everything. Verse number 4. Heshbon, this is 20 miles east of the Jordan River. It's in North Moab. Shall cry, Elileh, their voice shall be heard even unto Jahaz. And so you could hear the screams from one little community to another community. Therefore, the armed soldiers of Moab shall cry. It is so bad, and it was so hopeless, that even the National Guard of Moab said, man, we're done. And so they began to cry out. His life shall be grievous unto him. Now, you would think, kind of like Jonah did with Nineveh, yes, the Lord's going to kill them. Yeah, you would think maybe that we're going to get a little bit of that. Look what Isaiah says in verse number 5. My heart shall cry out for Moab. Man, this is heartbreaking stuff. His fugitives shall flee unto Zoar. Now, Zoar is in the extreme south. So their goal was to get out of Dodge, get out of the north, and go down to the south, so perhaps they could survive. And heifer of 3 years old, for by the mounting up of Luhith with weeping shall they go it up. For in the way of Horonaim they shall raise up a cry of destruction. Horonaim means two holes. Have no clue why, but it just means two holes. And it's in, you can see a progression of movement. This is in the central part of Moab. So we started up north, squeezed all those cities. Whoever could get out, got out. Now we're down in the central portion. They're headed to Zoar, which is down south. Verse 6, for the waters of Nimrim shall be desolate, for the day is withered away, the grass faileth, there is no green thing. And the reason there was no green thing was these soldiers have denuded everything in the fields. If you had a garden, it got stomped. If you had a field full of corn or wheat, it got destroyed. And so nothing is there. Therefore, verse 7, the abundance they have gotten, and that which they have laid up shall they carry away to the brook of the willows. Now we're talking about the Moabites now. So everything that their money, their clothes, their personal belongings, they load all this stuff up, and they're headed down south. All right, they're trying to cross the river to get out of the reach of the Assyrians. For the cry is gone round about the borders of Moab. Now enough people have escaped. The word is spreading. Man, the Assyrians, good night. Have you heard what they did? Get out of here. You got it. And so, I mean, the word has spread through the whole country. And the howling thereof unto Aglim, and the howling thereof unto Bir Elim, which means a well of princes. So you could, well, let's see, if Zolfo Springs was on fire, could we see it from parts of Wauchula? This is what we're looking at. I mean, these cities were not like Los Angeles and New York that far apart. These cities were just a few miles apart, and you could see. If a city was on fire, you could see, all right? So, for the waters of Dimon, and the word Dimon means bloody. Now, there's a kind of a play on words here. For the waters of Dimon shall be full of blood. So, in other words, it's going to fulfill its name. Okay, bloody is going to be bloody. For I will bring more upon Dimon, not through yet. There may be some that will escape out into the wilderness. Well, I got some for them out in the wilderness too. Lions upon him that escapeth of Moab, and upon the remnant of the land. So there may have been some that got away. But the Lord had his sentries in the wilderness as well. The lions would get them. I'm telling you this, you don't touch God's kid. You don't do that. And we've talked about this many, many times before. We need to pray that our country never, ever touches God's kid. Never. I don't care who's against us. And right now, Russia, Turkey, Syria, all those countries north of Israel, very interested in some troop movements against the Jews. And when they do, what's going to happen? What's the Lord going to do? He's going to let them collect in the valley of Megiddo. See, I mean, all of the countries that Ezekiel 38 lists going to be there. And the Jews won't have to fight. The Lord is going to somehow, Scripture just says, with the sword of his mouth, and going to wipe just hundreds of thousands of military personnel out. And this is still future. All right, now, verse 1 of chapter 6, actually this is one, not a paragraph, but it's one unit, one narrative. Verse number 1 says, send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land that was King Amaziah of Judah. And so here's what is being said. You need to send a peace offering to Amaziah. Perhaps the Jews will open their gates and let you come in, let your refugees come in, and you can protect them from the Assyrians. Maybe that'll happen. And so he says, once you send a lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah. Now this is Petra, this rose-red city, way down south of the Dead Sea, and send it unto the mount of the daughter of Zion. So perhaps y'all can send this peace offering. And in this point in history, if one country or one king wanted to appease another king or just kind of say, okay, we're sorry, we shouldn't have done that, you'd send them an animal or a group of animals. And a lamb was a very common thing because it's a very common thing in this part of the world. So verse number 4, for it shall be, maybe, that as a wandering bird cast out of the nest. So here's a fledgling that is old enough to build his own nest and, start hunting for himself. That's like the Moabites have been kicked out of the house. So the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon, or the gorge of Arnon, where on your map, the Arnon River, which comes out about in the middle of the Dead Sea, there's a gorge right there. And this gorge is what he's talking about here in verse 2, these people were headed there to try to get some relief, but maybe Israel will let you come in. Verse 4, let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them. Another, a request from Moab. This sounds like it's the other way around, but this is a request from Moab to Judah to let the refugees come in. And he says, verse 4, okay, let mine outcast dwell with thee. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner. Now this is Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, is at an end, the spoiler ceaseth, the oppressors are consumed out of the land, and in mercy shall the throne be established. Now this jumps way ahead to the Messianic kingdom. And he shall sit upon it in truth, in the tabernacle of David, judging and seeking judgment, and hasting righteousness. Now, we get back to contemporary events in verse number 6. The answer to this request of can we come is going to be, nope, you cannot. And here's the reason why. We've heard of the pride of Moab. He's very proud, even of his haughtiness. He's even proud of his pride. He's so proud, he's proud of it, And his pride and his wrath, but his lies shall not be so. He's not telling the truth. Apparently, they were trying to kiss up to Judah. And the king said, sorry about your luck, man. Y'all have done so much to us. And anyway, they wouldn't let them do it. Therefore, shall Moab howl for Moab. Everyone shall howl for the foundations, and the word foundations is translated men. For the men of Kir Hareseth shall ye mourn, surely they are stricken. Now, this is a city in south central Moab, again, that was just devastated. For the fields of Heshbon languish. Now we're going to get into the agricultural devastation. We've already lost thousands of citizens. Now we're going to get into the agriculture. The fields of Heshbon languish. The vine of Sibmah, the lords of the heathen, have broken down. The principal plants thereof, they are come even unto Jazer, which is 15 miles from Heshbon. So we're talking about a lot of square miles here that these guys have just absolutely plundered and devastated. And they didn't have manufacturing jobs, and they couldn't go to grocery store. This was their grocery store. This was how they ate. This is how they survived. And now all of that is gone, those that survived. They're come even unto Jazer. They wandered through the wilderness. Her branches are stretched out. They are gone over the sea. This is the Dead Sea. Therefore, I will bewail with the weeping of Jazer. So now he goes back to this. This is horrible. Isaiah was a Jew, and he was looking at the Moabites suffering like this. Let me ask you a question. How badly would it break your heart if something happened really, really bad in Syria, something really bad happened, people got killed, buildings, say the government just got crushed in Syria, would that break your heart? We might be on the sidelines going, yes, yes. And I've got to admit, there are times, I love Israel, when, these rockets just keep coming in from the Gaza Strip. You don't hear about this part of it, by the way. What you hear about is when Israel retaliates. Oh, the Jews, they're aggressors. They're on the... No, they've had probably 6,000, 7,000 rockets. This happens monthly, by the way. And these folks that live in the Gaza Strip, they don't have anything that'll shoot straight for 100 yards. And so when they light these things off, it's like a Roman candle, just goes crazy. You never know what it's going to hit. Fortunately, most of the time it hits out in the middle of nothing. But every now and then it will just, it'll hit a building and do some damage. I've got to admit to you that there are things that I find it hard to mourn over. All right, let me ask you another touchy question. When Osama bin Laden got killed, what'd you do? He was the brain behind 9/11. And our guys found him in the house, and one of our Navy SEALs shot him right between the eyes. Killed him graveyard dead. They took his body, put it on a Navy ship, and this is the report anyway. Supposedly they just threw him off that ship and buried him somewhere out there. But did you feel a sense of? I got to admit, I didn't. I really didn't. And I am impressed with the heart of Isaiah here. Now, I've got to also put a disclaimer in that. I hate to see any kid, any child get hurt. But when something of that magnitude, kids are with their mom and dad, and that is going to happen. But Isaiah says, I will bewail. I'm going to join them in their weeping. The vine of Sibma, I will water thee with my tears, O Heshbon and Elilah, for the shouting for thy summer fruits and for thy harvest is fallen. And so these people were not only heartbroken about the death, the human loss, but their future, they're going to starve to death now. There's nothing left for these people to eat. And Isaiah is heartbroken over that. He's touched by that. And he says in verse number 10, gladness is taken away. When your joy is gone, wow. Your gladness, your happiness in life is just evaporated. It's gone. And joy out of the plentiful field. Now, we have gardens and somebody grows our food. I don't. But, we have tomatoes at Walmart all the time. Somebody grows those. We got all kind of vegetables and produce and stuff like that. What if we went to any grocery store and there was nothing? Nothing. Well, last night, the Russians came in and they poisoned all the fields and everything. How would... and then your kids are like, well, what's for dinner? Well, we don't have anything. Yeah. What? It's the neighbor's dog. The neighbor's dog is for dinner. We have never, ever experienced starvation. I never have. Have you ever used the term, boy, I'm starving to death? Well, no, we're not. That means 3 hours ago I ate, and I'm... But I have never been in a situation where my family could not eat. Could not eat. Has anybody been in a situation like that? We have. You have? Tell me about it. if you can. Go to sleep. Wow. Wow. How old were you at that time? So did that happen quite often? Wow. Now, see, we all sit here stunned that somebody today, lives in that kind of, I'm talking about in our lifetime. But this, in most of the world, this is probably normal. So what I'm saying, one of the reasons I think the United States has been blessed is because of our relationship with Israel. And I'm amazed that people don't understand that. They think, no. The reason that we're the richest is because we've got this and that. No, one of the reasons, I think the main reason, is because we have been a friend to God's child. This is God's kid. I know it's maybe a crude way to put it, but if somebody found your child wandering out in the middle of a big city somewhere, and they picked your child up, took them to a restaurant, fed them, and looked you up and found you and delivered your child safe, and how would you respond to that person? Got a friend for life?
Even if he was a mass murderer, which is what the United States has become, God has been gracious to us because
Yep.
we are still a friend to Israel.
We're a friend to Israel, exactly right. And so I kind of get tickled when people say, well, that happened back in Bible times.
Like the little boy that told me when I told him I was going to Israel that Jesus was still there, and he said, oh yeah, that's in the Bible, it's not there anymore.
They moved it, right? Well, can I tell you that we are in Bible times right now? We live in Bible times, and it's funny that people have this disconnect, from history. We are right in the middle of Bible times today. God has not changed his mind about this little bitty hinge of a nation over there that should not even exist tonight, but they do. Not only do they exist, but they're thriving. It's amazing. And so gladness is taken away, joy out of the plentiful field. And in the vineyards there shall be no singing. So what does that tell you that these people did normally during the harvest? It was choir practice. Neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses, because the grapes have been destroyed. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. All right, now, what was the nation now that was the gear work doing this to the Moabites? The Assyrians. Okay? The Assyrians thought, I'm doing this on my own and by my own volition. We read this last week, and the Lord was like, no, you're not. I am using you. And they were so proud, they were like, I ain't being used by anybody. I'm doing this because I'm bad enough to do it, and nobody can stop us. So do you think maybe God still uses that utilitarian method today? Does he still use human instrumentality to bring blessing or cursing? How else does he do it? You understand? He uses people to introduce to you either his judgment or his grace. Now, we're part of this delivery system. So I don't ever want to be a delivery truck that brings horror to anybody. I don't ever want to do that. And I don't think you do either. You don't want to bring hurt and devastation to anybody. You know, we want to be carriers of what is good and right and pure and helpful and encouraging. That's what I want to deliver to people, and I think I could probably speak for everybody in here. That's your passion in life. That's what you want to be in life. And so the closer I am to the person of Jesus Christ, the more my truck is loaded with the person of Jesus Christ. The more of his grace, the more of his personality, the more of his nature is infused into me. And so when I come into contact with people, I just deliver what's been delivered to me. That's exactly what you do. And so there's no more shouting, no more singing. We turn the CD off. There's nothing to sing about anymore. Verse number 11. Wherefore, my bowels, this sounds funny to me, my bowels shall sound like a harp. That ever happened to you, by the way? Well, the word bowels means seat of emotion, and we use it, we say the word heart today. His heart was just being uprooted for these people. It was horrible what he was feeling. For Moab and mine inward parts for Kirharesh. I don't know I'm not sure what God's revealed to him, like in a vision to see, people laying in the street with their heads cut off and holes whacked in them and children dismembered. I don't know what all Isaiah saw, but it broke his heart. Verse number 12. And it shall come to pass, when it is seen that Moab is weary on the high place. Now we're back in church. That he shall come to his sanctuary to pray, but he shall not prevail. In other words, this is worthless praying. What's Chemosh going to do? So they run up the high place. That's the contact point for this false god. They got real needs, but they got a false god. There's real hurt, real devastation going on, but they've got a synthetic deity that can do nothing. Oh, Chemosh had eyes and a nose, but Chemosh couldn't see, couldn't smell, couldn't feel, couldn't hear, couldn't speak, could do nothing. Now, I'm thankful that we have a God that has the capacity not only to listen, but to move and to speak and to bless. We don't serve a God like Chemosh. Christianity is a unique thing in this world. It has revealed to us the person of the living God. And you know who we can thank for being the human vessel that introduced monotheism to the human race? The Jew. They were the first ones. Every other culture and every other civilization was polytheistic. They were just pagans. It was demonism. Can I tell you that Satan is probably the most effective evangelist that we know anything about? Most of the world is lost thanks to his evangelism. Oh, my word, it works. He's doing a fabulous job. And so he's got most of the world deceived, but most of the world is very religious. Isn't that amazing how religious the world is, but most of the world's going to hell? What does that tell you about the world's religions? It's just greasing the rails for an eternity without God. And so it shall come to pass that they're going to be praying for nothing. They're wasting their time. This is the word that the Lord hath spoken concerning Moab since that time. So Isaiah has recorded for us what God told him about this one particular nation. Pretty devastating. And it happened. It happened about 3 years later. Verse 14, but now the Lord hath spoken, saying, within 3 years, as the years of an hireling, and the average contract for an indentured servant was, guess how long? 3 years. So he says, within 3 years, and the glory of Moab shall be contemned with all that great multitude, and the remnant shall be very small and feeble. And guess what happened? I mean, that year, 3 years later, everything he wrote about happened. And so this book is a telescope into the future for these people, and it's also going to serve as a telescope into the future of the world. One of the reasons that Isaiah is such a monumental figure in human history is because of what he has shown us about our future. And so I'll put this on your prayer list, that the United States will never abandon her friendship with the Jewish people. Now, Russia, I ain't worried about that. Syria, not worried about them. Egypt, not worried about them. Israel. If we will remain friends with Israel, God will bless us. And he has, for what, 235 years, something like that. And so there are more Jews in New York City than there are in Israel right now. And most of them are doing really well. The Lord has blessed them everywhere they go. The standard of living is raised. And people hate them for that. Now, I don't understand that. Jamie? And that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, Trump pointed that out a few weeks ago and just took flamethrowers for it. I don't know if you remember that, but he just said it. A Jew that votes for a Democrat is disloyal to Israel. And the media was like, what? Well, you can't say that. Oh, it's great. Yeah. Great. Yeah. He cracks me up. He really does. Oh, my goodness. All right. Y'all ready to go to the house? Oh, whoa. No, y'all ain't ready to go to the house. We got to get some tables set up here. Got a